Welcome to episode 2 of Fiction Friday. Glad to see you again. I'm Heather Shoemaker, author of books for kids and grown-ups, and this episode is dedicated to Max in Michigan. Max, I'm glad you read the book. Max and his mother read The Griffins of Castle Cary, and they posted an online book review. This is what Max said. And now remember, I'm doing a little dedication. Maybe it could be you next time, because at the front of a book, there's always a dedication page. So this show is dedicated to Max. Here's what Max had to say about The Griffins of Castle Cary. This story is great and not too scary. The ghosts are kind of nice and also kind of scary until you learn more about them. When you learn what the ghosts want, you understand them better. And then they're not so scary. They're sort of like people. When you learn more about people, you understand them better. My favorite character was Meg because she was so brave. This was a really good adventure book and very entertaining. I didn't want us to stop reading. I hope the author will write another book with more adventures about Meg, Will, and Ariel. I hope so too, Max. And I'm glad you told me that your favorite character was Meg. I agree. She is super brave, much braver than I could be. One of my favorite characters in the book is Aunt Effie. Now, she's the children's aunt, and they go stay with her in England at her house. And I had a lot of fun writing her character. She drives a little car called a Mini. I'm just going to read a short little bit when we first meet Aunt Effie. When we first meet her, she's picking up the kids and trying to stuff all their luggage into her little mini car. Never underestimate a Mini, answered Aunt Effie. You should see what I can jam into this creature. Why, in Japan, they once fit 21 people inside. The world record for people in a Mini is held by the Tollbooth Dance Company in the States. 26 people. In the newer model, of course, more legroom. Did you know Tollbooth is the Latin name for a fungus? Grows on cow manure and shoots off ballistic spores like a cannon. Funny name for a dance company, isn't it? So that's Aunt Effie. She's a little bit eccentric. She's a really fun aunt. She likes to play and she takes good care of the kids, but she's just got a lot of quirky ways and she rambles off on these stories. So she was one of my most favorite characters to write. And I just wanted to share with you how I begin to develop characters for a story. Because no matter how exciting your plot is, if you don't care about the characters it's happening to, people aren't really going to want to keep reading. So I like to really get to know my characters really well. Just the way you get to know your friends, you have to spend time with your characters. So I started my book off, in this case, some books I start with the story. This time I started with character writing, and I have a whole notebook, pages and pages. I have pages on each character. So this is Meg's page, and I have basic things like what does she look like, and when's her birthday, and some of her favorite things, and what's her school like, and what sports does she play, the things she's scared of, the things that she might be when she grows up. And I go on and on about Meg and who she is and getting to know her. And then I have that this is Will's page. Each kid has about 3 or 4 pages, getting to know them. And I would just sit and brainstorm and think about who is this person and what would they do in this kind of a situation. But one thing that's different in my story, as Max pointed out, is that the ghosts are just as real as the rest of people. And they have feelings and dreams and hopes, just like the kids and the other characters. So here's the page for one of the ghosts in the story, and she goes on and on. I know so much about her life before she died and what kind of a ghost she would be based on what happened to her. So I don't share most of this in the book at all. These are things I had to do as an author behind the scenes to get to know the characters well enough to make sure that when they appeared in the story that they would seem realistic to you and that you would get to know them and care about them too. Sometimes writers talk about putting your character up a tree, so they're kind of in a difficult situation where they have to keep their balance, and then throw rocks at them. So you've got them in a difficult situation, and then you make the difficult situation even harder. Think about Harry Potter in those books. Harry Potter is a likable character. We're always rooting for him. He's loyal to his friends. He's brave. There's a lot of things to like about him. But boy, does he have problems. So to get your character in a story that other people are going to want to root for them and rescue them and want to keep reading to the end, you create somebody that you get to know really well. You make them likable, but then you give them problems. You put them up a tree and then you throw rocks at them. And then by the end of the book, you have to show how they come down out of the tree and how things resolve. So spend some time getting to know your characters. Dream about them, think about them, and then make sure that the characters that you create are different from each other, right? That can be hard when you're just starting out writing a book. Sometimes they all seem the same because you're you and you only really know yourself. But think about all the people that you meet. Maybe online right now rather than out and about, but all the people in your family and all the interesting characters that you meet, and try to put those into your characters. You don't want to make one that sounds just like your mom or she might notice, but create characters based on little bits of people that you meet in life. Okay, now it's time for the story cape. I think you remember this from last time. This is my story cape, which you all have too, though yours might be invisible unless you sew one yourself. All the memories and all the imaginative ideas that you come up with during your life as you live your life. And then these things stick to you, just like pom-poms that I have stuck to me. So last time we pulled one off, and it was one about hiccups. So this time, let's see, we'll take one from the back. Can I reach it? All right. Okay. This one is kind of a fun one. This is an animal, and why I put this animal in my story for the Griffins of Castle Carey. This is Caesar the sheep. Now, if I visited your school, you might have heard this story, but I'm going to have some new ones for you too. This one is Caesar the sheep. He is a ram, and you know the ram is the male sheep. So he has big horns on his head, and I met a ram named Caesar back when I had a job as a milkmaid. I had a job milking a cow, all dressed up in old-fashioned clothes because I was at a historic farm where everything is set to look like it was about 200 years ago. And so I was dressed up in a bonnet and an old-fashioned clothes, and I sat in a milk pail, and I milked the cow by hand. And I did other things because you can't milk one cow all day long. The cow's name was Hannah, by the way. So after I'd finished milking Hannah, I had to do other jobs around this historic farm. And one of my jobs was cleaning out the sheep barn, mucking out the manure, right? All the sheep poop that had gathered up in the old straw, and it was all kind of stinky. Well, I did that. And while I was doing it, the sheep were sort of milling around, including Caesar, the ram. Now, I'd been told my very, very first day on the job, never turn your back on Caesar. Because if you do, he's going to butt you. If he thinks you're not watching, he's going to ram you. That's why they call them rams. So I remembered very carefully, every time I was in the sheep pen, I would keep my body turned so that I could always keep an eye on Caesar. Except once, when I forgot. And that one time I turned my back, I wasn't thinking of Caesar, and wham! He came and rammed me right in the backside, and I fell into a pile of sheep manure. Now, that's one of the things that stuck to me over time, right? It stuck to me. And I didn't know it would come up in this book, but I put this little memory, because I never forgot it, in this book in a very small instance. That they're in a part of England, Somerset, so there's a lot of sheep farming. And I have a ram named Caesar who appears in the book. He has a very small part, but it's an important part, especially at the climax. And the reason there is a ram and the reason the ram's name is Caesar is because of the real life ram named Caesar and that fateful day when I fell in the pile of manure. So, kind of funny now, but when it happens, it's not quite so funny. So even when bad things are happening to you, they'll stick to you, and someday maybe you'll end up putting them in a story, and it ended up being kind of a comic story, a funny story of some sort. All right, my story idea for the day. One thing I also really like, and I think it's one of the reasons that I became a writer, is I just love cool words. And I like words that we don't use very often. So one of the words that I really like is fratchy. Fratchy isn't a word you hear much. You're not going to see it on a spelling test. Fratchy means quarrelsome. And I picked that word because I thought if we're all cooped up, if you're cooped up day after day with your family, you might be feeling a little bit fratchy right now. That means you're arguing with everybody, not that you can't get on with anybody. You're feeling fratchy with your brothers and sisters and your parents or whoever you're home with. So fratchy is kind of a cool thing. I find some of these old words in books like this. This is called The Lost Beauties of the English Language. It has all sorts of really cool words in it. And one of the things I also like to do when I'm developing characters is to figure out what their names mean, what the meaning of their names mean. So, for example, my name Heather is the heather plant. I am related to a purpley pink kind of flower. And I wanted to show you a picture of what that flower looks like. So this is the heather plant. And I think you can see that, just go to the next slide here. This is what it looks like close up. And then this is what it looks like out in the countryside. Now, this is more in England where my book is set. You'll have a lot of heather just growing wild. In fact, if you've ever read Winnie the Pooh books, you'll know that Winnie the Pooh tromps around outside a lot and in the 100-acre wood, but he also sees gorse, which has a yellow flower, and heather, which has this purple flower. And then I also wanted to show you what these words mean or look like. So here's the word fratchy, and an old-fashioned word for heather is the word ling. It's sort of a word we don't hear much anymore, but ling means heather. So that's another word for my name. Now, because this show is dedicated to Max, I wanted to tell Max what his name means. Maybe you already know that your name is connected with the name Maximilian. And Maximilian means in Latin, the greatest. So Max, you are the greatest. Do you know what your name means? Maybe you can figure it out. Look what your first name means. One of the things that I use for a first name is looking at baby books. So because people who are trying to figure out what to name their baby, they sometimes look in these sorts of books to find out what the meaning of their child's name would be. You can also look on the computer. There's all kinds of what to name the baby sites. So you don't have to be having a baby to find out, but they're great sites for looking for what your name means. If you're interested in what your name means, go look that up. Kind of fun. Sometimes they fit you, and sometimes they really have nothing to do with who you are, but it's still kind of fun to know what your name means. I often hide name meanings in character names in my books, some books more than others. So if you want to dig into that, you can see what the character names that I chose, Meg, Will, and Ariel, and why I might have chosen those names based on their meanings. Okay, I think we're ready for the day's joke. All right, so this is why I had to do a couple ghost jokes. Why does the ghost always need more books? Why does the ghost always need more books? Because she goes through them so quickly. All right, there's your ghost joke. Now, so that you don't stay fratchy when you're cooped up, I was actually thinking about more books that you might like. And I was thinking about books about kids who are feeling cooped up and bored. And one of the books that came to mind is this book. It's called Keeping Corner. And it doesn't mean that you're in a corner. This is a book, a story about a girl in India. And it's set 100 years ago. This book is called Keeping Corner by Kashmira Seth. She lives in Wisconsin, so if you're from Wisconsin, maybe you've met her. This book is about a 12-year-old girl who gets married. Back then, sometimes very young kids got married, and the boy that she marries dies, and so she, at age 12, is a widow. And back then, 100 years ago, a widow in India was considered bad luck and had to stay inside for a whole year in their house. So this girl goes from having a nice life with friends in school, and then she alone has to stay in her house for a year. And cut off her hair, shave her hair, and wear rough clothes. It's an interesting book. It shows you how she gets by being stuck in her house for a year, by finding the strength within herself and the support of her family and her teacher. So Keeping Corner is an interesting book. If you're feeling stuck in your house and fratchy and cooped up, maybe you'd enjoy Keeping Corner. Another book that comes to mind is one of my absolute favorites ever, The Phantom Tollbooth. Have you read this book? This one starts out with a boy who doesn't know what to do. This is the first sentence. There was once a boy named Milo who didn't know what to do with himself, not just sometimes, but always. Well, sometimes you just don't know what to do with yourself. But just like Milo, if you keep looking and keep trying things, you'll fall into amazing adventures. This book, you can read, what's wonderful about it is you can read it at any age. So you'll enjoy this if you're 8 years old. But if you read it at 8, don't forget to read it again when you're 12 or 14 or grown up, because there are jokes on every single page, including the names of the characters. So you will only get some of the jokes when you're 8, but you'll still love this story. And as you read it when you're older, you'll get more and more of the jokes. So here's a joke you can see just right on the cover. There's Milo, the boy, and there's one of the characters that he meets that's just an unforgettable character. It's the watchdog, Talk. You can see he's actually a watchdog made with a watch on him, right? And I love the watchdog. He and Milo are good buddies. There he is scratching an itch with, he's not scratching it. He's winding his watch up with his back leg, the way a dog would when he's scratching an itch. So I just love Talk the watchdog. One thing, of course, because he's a watchdog, he's guarding time. And he meets Milo when Milo's stuck in the doldrums and doesn't know what to do and isn't doing anything. And he says to Milo, "What are you doing?" And Milo says, "Just killing time." That's an expression we use, just killing time. But to the watchdog, he says, "Killing time," roared the dog, so furiously his alarm went off. It's bad enough wasting time without killing it. You gotta love Talk, the watchdog. And there's so many good characters in this book, including the very, very short policeman, Short Shrift. And if you want to know when my birthday is, it's the same birthday as Short Shrift, so I've always kind of liked him. I recommend, this is also, it's not like the Keeping Corner book, which is a much more realistic book. This one is more of an escapist book. So if you're feeling bored and don't know what to do and you just want a lot of laughs and escape from your troubles, then you might want to read The Phantom Tollbooth or try a fun, funny book like that. All right. Well, Max, I hope you've liked your show. And if you're feeling fratchy, just go outside now or go read a good book. And if you would like a show dedicated to you next time, just write me a note or post me an online review about the book with your name and age, and I will dedicate a future show to you. Now, I found out that YouTube won't let us do comments right on YouTube because this is a show marked as for kids, but you can still find me and leave comments, and just go to my website. I'll show you where that is in a minute, and you can leave a comment there on the contact page. So here's a couple things that you can use to find me. So here's Fratchy again. But here is how to find me, heathershoemaker.com, or you could also find me on Facebook. I'm called Heather Shoemaker Writer, so you can not get me confused with other possible people with that name. And there's another great resource I wanted to show you, which is if you're interested in getting a book, then there's a great resource called Bookshop, which is popping up because people can't go to the library and they can't go to their local bookstores because a lot of even local bookstores are closing. So the Bookshop is a way, it's kind of like Amazon, but it supports local independent bookshops. So you order it through Bookshop, and then your local independent bookstore gets some of the money. So if you're interested in trying that, and maybe your bookstore, your local bookstore, isn't part of it yet, you can call them or write to them and say, hey, this is a way that we can support you and support books even during the coronavirus time. All right. Well, that's all for this week and this second episode of Fiction Fridays. I hope you have a good week ahead of you, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.